All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Everybody, we are here. We are live. We're here every day live, noon to noon, just like the old AGO show. We took our radio show, we moved it to this platform, YouTube. We thought it would be the most accessible platform, frankly, and it has proven successful. The whole crew. We have Kim, who is, of course, dreamy and fabulous and writing news.
Kim, how are you?
And we have the former fresh-faced producer. And now we call him the commissioner, or we just call him Albert. I don't know why we dropped the fresh-faced. I kind of like fresh-faced, but yeah, still once in a while we'll slip into it. He is a fresh-faced producer, Albert. This is a crowd-funded program, so we appreciate you, all of you who support us on an ongoing basis. More on that a little bit later. Joe Ferrullo joined us in the second hour. The Pope has condemned the criminalization of homosexuality, and Joe Ferrullo is the editor-in-chief of a Catholic publication, sort of the Catholic publication online. We'll get to that. This law and disorder is crazy today. I will share that with you. That's in the second hour. The first hour is all storms and politics. John Rothman on the politics. And Spencer will talk weather with us because there's some serious weather systems moving into California. Actually, something of an unprecedented scenario building in Southern California. There are blizzard warnings up in Southern California, and to the best of record keeping, it would appear that that's never happened before in Southern California. They have these blizzard warnings in these areas of the mountains where they have them. And so that's only part of the weather story because, as you know, the nation is getting pounded as well. So we'll concentrate on California because that's where we are, but we'll also cover that news as well.
I was reading a story in SF Gate yesterday that said that almost all California residents will be able to see snow, even if that means looking near your, closest mountain peak. That everyone is going to be able to turn around and look at some type of snow.
I think California, and because we get slam people that are leaving, can't stand the taxes, can't stand the politics, whatever it might be. I think it's just one of the most spectacular places on earth. It's so beautiful. And what you're talking about, I think is one of the reasons. You can see the mountains, the vistas of the ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me where else you can do that.
There's nowhere, Mark. That's why California's the best.
There's nothing like this, Mark. It's a stunning place, America. We have our growing pains, but it's a stunning place. But yeah, this is going to be. Look, it's going to be pretty intense though this winter weather, and I guess the cold is really kind of settling in. In a moment, we'll get to Spencer Christian. We'll talk about that. I do want to acknowledge Steve Moskowitz. He is our sponsor. More than 30 years, Steve has been putting tax knowledge to work for individuals and businesses alike. If you need help with your taxes, call Steve, 888-TAX-DEAL, or reach him on the web, MoskowitzLLP.com.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Albert, what is it? I'm seeing a message. What is it that you want to communicate?
I think we have some, I think it's been a while, but I do think we have some major news to break here.
Oh, really? Okay. Would you say this is a major announcement, or is it just major?
Personally, I do think it does warrant a major announcement.
Well, you have a low bar for the major announcement, but nonetheless, let's. All right, well then let's fire it up. It's a major announcement.
A major announcement from the Mark Thompson Show. A major announcement.
I don't even know what the announcement is. Albert, what is the major announcement, please?
I was doing some pre-work, surprisingly hustling. You mentioned the bar, and you already know the story about the bar. The bar is set low enough for me to reach it every time.
Yes, and Albert likes to keep a low bar in terms of his performance and his work. It's true.
Wise, yes.
Yeah.
As long as you're making it to your bar, that's all fine. But then I did work on a new sting. Of course, a lot of people like our music, like our little musical elements, and I have to debut it. It's brand new.
This is a sting, so sting, just so everybody knows, a little shorter. Like the sweepers are the long things you hear with all the drops. This is a shorter thing, a sting. So that's what we're going to hear. Okay, go ahead, Albert. Let's hear it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is the Mark Thompson Show. Keep it to yourself.
Oh, I like it. Very nice, Albert.
It's very well West Wing. Yes.
It's very. It
Very
feels like Kevin Costner's voice should come on. It's got that kind of music. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's very presidential.
It is. You're right, Kim. I think it is presidential. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. That's a. Well, now I really like it.
Do you know who I am?
Yeah,
I'm kind of a big deal.
All right. Albert, nice job. Thank you. And certainly worthy of a major announcement. So we'll be hearing that maybe later in the show, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I might just play every rejoin. I might just hit that same one because I'm proud of my work, Mark. I'm very
married to it
much.
at this point. All right.
Smash the like button.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Like a boss for the new rejoiner. That is the result of Albert's hard work. And now, let me bring this guy on. Friend of the show, always available when we need him, even in this busy time. I mean, this really is, if you're a weather guy, it's like Super Bowl week every week.
Yeah.
The former weather anchor at Good Morning America. I need a minute once in a while when I reflect on that.
Just say you can get through it. It's okay.
I'm not saying I would have done a better job than Spencer Christian, but I would have done as good a job. That's all I'm saying.
Don't even go there.
How about a welcome for Spencer Christian, everybody? Come on, ABC 7.
Hey, thank you. I'm sorry I stole your career. Listen, did I just hear
it? But you did. Go ahead. Yes.
I just hear the unmistakable voice of Shadow Stevens.
Oh, yes.
I have Shadow Stevens stories. He and I had a lot of interaction. Back in the days when I was a guest square on Hollywood Squares several times. And, Shadow was the announcer. And I always thought, man, if I had a voice like that, I'd have a future in broadcasting.
Wait a minute. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens.
Yeah, so he was the voice of Hollywood Squares. Ultimately became a... So wait a minute.
Mark,
you were on
ever a guest on Hollywood Squares, Mark?
You were on Hollywood. You were a square on Hollywood Squares?
Only for a few
Wait a minute. Did Good Morning America send you there to do one of those little featurey stories where you're like a little guest square and it's kind of like a stunt type thing? Or were you actually on Hollywood Squares as a celebrity in one of the squares?
I was on the show as a celebrity in one of those squares, but only for a week.
God,
that's right.
What?
Yeah.
Only for about 5 or 6 weeks, and it wasn't
5 or 6 weeks the man was on. Oh, and he said only 5 or 6. Kim, he doesn't even realize what a gifted life he's had.
You know what?
It's outrageous.
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Only 5 or 6 weeks.
Consecutive weeks. I was just here and there,
Oh.
Spencer, so you can't tell him things like that. Look what happens to us now. Look what you've done.
Do you know who I am? I'm kind of a big deal.
I toiled in my profession. I'm diligent. I work hard.
Yeah.
I am dynamic. I'm charismatic. I mean, look at me.
Nothing.
Exactly. For all of that, I got nothing. And Spencer Christian.
Well,
he gets Good Morning America, and he gets 5 or 6 weeks on Hollywood Squares.
Yeah, but they weren't consecutive.
Can you let him finish, sir?
No, he's finished. All right, so listen.
You know how big of a deal someone is as to whether or how long they've been on Hollywood Squares.
I agree. I mean, if you said, well, it was only a week. I mean, even that would be a knife to the gut. But 5 or 6 weeks, multiple knives to the gut.
Well,
there's one thing I didn't mention to you long ago in all the many years we've known each other after I stole your career on Good Morning America. I know I mentioned how much money I was making. I mean, I was soaked in money because of my morning television work. I didn't mention that I was on Hollywood Squares for 5 or 6 weeks. How dare you? The next thing you're going to tell me is you had a guest role on Miami Vice or something. I mean, this is
I feel like we should get it all out now, Spencer. Now's the time to lay it all on the table.
I did have one on All My Children.
Oh,
okay. Pretty good. You on All My Children, Mark?
I never was.
What?
I was not on All My Children. I've done a couple of things, but Spencer is so polite that he'll let me take a little bit of the limelight as I talk about some of the movies I've been in or whatever. But the reality is he's on the rocket ship to the moon, and I'm just orbiting. I'm just orbiting Earth. Anyway, you're lucky I love you so much, or otherwise I would be seething with resentment. But you are a good guy, and you deserve it. I want to get to weather, but before I do, I want to ask you about Jimmy Carter, because Jimmy Carter is a real friend of yours. You've been asked to, MC I think the benefits and benefits / birthday celebrations that he's had.
This photo he's showing right now is from his 75th birthday celebration in 1999 in Americus, Georgia, and had the honor of being invited to MC. This was a huge event. I mean, it's an old historic theater in Americus, and it was attended by like 900 to 1,000 people, dignitaries, and diplomats and members of the Senate, stuff like that. That was really cool. And then 20 years later, this one, 2019, I was invited back to MC his 95th. In fact, this Mark was a joint celebration of Jimmy Carter's 95th and Mrs. Rosalind Carter's 92nd birthday. And wow. They are, as you know, they are just remarkable people. I mean, they've devoted their lives to serving humanity, to elevating the quality of life for the impoverished and the underserved. This is from an afternoon show we did here back in around 2009, 2010, called The View from the Bay. Carter's a prolific author, and he had just released a book called "We Can Have Peace in the Promised Land," in the Holy Land, and he came on our show as a guest, and I interviewed him there. But I've had lots of interaction with him over the years, a lot of interaction.
And one of his, I think, cornerstone or signature achievements was getting a Middle East peace accord drafted.
Right. The Camp David Accord. He brought Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat together, and he basically insisted, "You're not leaving here till you reach a peace deal." It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We were talking about this the other day, and I was saying that his presidency, this is the political side, was set with issues, some of which he had no control over. I mean, but that's what the presidency is. I mean, let's face it. He inherited this economy that was in trouble with this inflationary economy. It continued through his presidency, and the Iranian hostage crisis really sealed his fate. I mean, there was just no way he was going to prevail. And if you actually look at what happened, even though the hostages were released as Reagan was sworn in, it was the deal was forged by the Carter people, to release those hostages. So I was saying that history, and I don't mean to make it uncomfortable at all, but history may view it as a failed presidency because of some of these things I talked about. Yet the reality is now, with the luxury of time, he's obviously an elder statesman. There is no questioning the purity of his heart. And when you look back at his presidency, you can see legitimate, remarkable achievements. Plus, the last thing I'll say, I love that he put solar panels on the White House. I mean, he was way ahead of his time.
And the Reagans took him out. How crazy is that?
Politics.
He was also the first president, I think, to talk about global warming as a matter of serious concern.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool that, that was the guy that you sparked with, and that came from Good Morning America, right? That you met him on GMA, yeah?
It did, yeah. I'll try to make a long story a little bit shorter. I had actually interviewed his, shall we say, nonconformist brother, Billy Carter, about 8 years before I met President Carter. So I interviewed Billy Carter and his wife Sybil in 1980 at WABC in New York, right? And then 8 years later now, during the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta, GMA sent me to the Carter Presidential Library to do an interview with Jimmy Carter. He comes up to me as we're setting up in the morning. He goes, "Hi, Spencer. I'm Jimmy Carter, and I want you to know the Carter family greatly appreciates how kind you were to Billy and Sybil." And I was blown away because that had been 8 years prior. And during that time of the Democratic Convention in 1988, Billy Carter was literally dying of cancer. So the way I met President Carter, it was such a personal thing. He and I formed a little bit of a connection there. And then I went on to work with them once on Habitat for Humanity. I did my GMA segments from that location, and one thing led to another, one interview led to another, and then the emceeing of the birthday events, and it just I can't
it's
believe the
remarkable.
life that I've been fortunate enough to live.
Yeah. I mean, really, really true. He didn't join you in Hollywood Squares at all,
No.
Spencer?
Oh,
Oh, that's too
I
bad.
should have thought to invite him. That would have been cool.
What? So he is now in hospice, and I'm sure you've been in touch with some of the people, and then we'll move on to the weather. But I just want to wrap up with Carter, who I think he's appreciated by everyone who is honest about looking at Jimmy Carter and the man he is.
That's right.
As I say, there's a purity of heart. A lot of people, you can say, well, he's a man of faith or whatever. Yeah, I get it. Look, the priest who molested my pal Jimmy was a man who went to church every Sunday, but a man who actually lives, I think, what he preaches.
Right.
I think you saw that in Jimmy Carter. Again, you may disagree with his politics and you may disagree about the success or failure of his presidency, but the purity of his work and his spirit, I think, can't be questioned.
No, you're absolutely right, Mark. I mean, you nailed it. He's a man who lives his faith every day, not by professing, how, religious he is. He lives it out. Well, let's put it this way. Jimmy Carter believes that his purpose in life is to serve God by serving humankind, and that's what he feels a what do you call it? A faithful servant is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that does say it. Anyway, he wish him a smooth passage if that's what he wants. It's certainly a peaceful time now with his family.
Yeah.
What happened to his daughter? His daughter was a big. She was a kind of a little mini star. One of the first sort of young kids to occupy the White House. Amy Carter, was that her name?
That's right. It's Amy Carter. And she none of the Carters really enjoyed being in the limelight, but she certainly didn't, because she was thrown into this limelight when she was 12 or 13 when he was elected, and some of the public comments made about her were unkind. So after that, I think they sheltered her a bit. But I have met Amy at a couple of the functions that I've emceed with the Carters, and she's living a wonderful life. She's got I think she even has grandchildren now, but I know she has grown up children. And
wow.
Just she is absolutely delightful. Yeah.
SNL did a sketch, and then we'll move on to weather. But SNL did a sketch that I thought was so funny. Amy Carter is in school, and Belushi and Aykroyd. So this is maybe season 1, of SNL or whatever.
Yeah.
They go in as her Secret Service agents, protecting the daughter of the president, and they're on either side of her desk as they stand there with the dark glasses and they're talking into their sleeves type thing. And there's an exam, and the Secret Service guy is looking over at the other person's answers and then passing them on to Amy, and trying and then reaching over her to fill in the actual correct answer. It's a pretty funny sketch, but it did, in a sense, point up, as you say, this weird thing that she was having to live her life out loud, and that's pretty hard for a little girl growing up.
It really is. Yeah.
I want to talk weather with you.
Yes.
It seems like the cold air has moved in. What can we expect, and how will we be affected?
Well, today we can expect scattered, I won't say isolated, scattered cold showers. I mean, really cold showers. Yesterday we had those fierce winds, gusts between 60 and 70 miles per hour at times. Today is going to be another windy day, but not quite that windy. So the wind advisory and the wind warnings that were issued yesterday will drop today, I think, around 1 p.m. But we can expect these cold showers and some light snow mixed in elevations down to about 1,500 feet. Now, that's unusual enough. Tomorrow and Friday, it's going to be so cold here in the Bay Area that daytime high temperatures in most places will not get out of the 40s. We're talking about afternoon high 47, 48 degrees, and snow levels may drop as low as 500 feet in the Bay Area. So today's little storm, we're just giving it a level 1 ranking on the storm impact scale. Tomorrow and Friday, we're calling it a level 2. And yes, often see, I shouldn't say often, but it's not unusual to see some light snow in the highest peaks like Mount Hamilton, Mount Diablo, maybe even down to Mount Tam. This time, the next 2 days, we'll see snow just on hillsides, down around 1,000 feet.
Wow.
That was a picture, by the way, of Arcata. We have a listener who says it snowed in the town of Arcata today. And there you go.
Here it is. Wow, that's Arcata. Oh, and down in Southern California, I think you mentioned something about this earlier. There's a blizzard warning, in effect, for the mountains of Los Angeles County and Ventura County, where they could receive, get this, 2 to 5 feet of snow.
That's crazy. Yeah, and as you say, it's a blizzard warning. It's not happened before. All my, the meteorologist pals that I hang out with, they're all scratching and go, we can't find any record of it ever having been like this. You know what I mean?
I've driven through snow down there in the Grapevine on my way to Commerce Poker Casino, but no.
That's my guy. Come on. That's my guy.
There's never been anything like this.
That we could see snow at sea level, like we could get some snow in our valleys. It's happened before.
Yeah, I think I think the last time snow fell at sea level in San Francisco, now maybe in other areas, it was something like, oh my gosh, 1908 or something like that. But I'm sure other places around the Bay Area have seen snow at sea level. Yeah.
And of course, just to I guess just to put a point on that, it's the moderating influence of the ocean and the bay. The water is what keeps the air mass essentially too warm for there to be snow.
Exactly.
And sorry, what were you going to say, Spencer?
Yeah. I was just going to say, and the national weather picture is all screwed up too. They've got record heat all over the southeastern quadrant. High temperatures up in the mid to upper 80s in some places today. Louisville and Little Rock and places like that. Then and up in the Northeast and in the upper Midwest, it's like the frigid cold snap. And well, Mark, from your weather days, you remember the occluded fronts, right?
Yes, yeah, right.
Yeah, the warm front rising up from the south and the cold front dropping down from the north, and they collide and they clash, and there's all this instability. So in addition to the snow and ice that may fall up in the Northeast, there could be some thunderstorms.
Yeah, severe weather, huh? Oh my God. And occluded is a ding word. I'm always loving our time with Spencer Christian. I am thinking of you. When I saw the news about Carter, I thought of you. And so thoughts and energy and good feeling is with you. And what can I say? We love you. Thank you. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. The news about your Hollywood Squares stint is going to leave a mark for a few days. I'll get over it. I'll put it with the emotional bruising that the Good Morning America gig loss is occupying. And how about it? Spencer Christian, everybody, from ABC 7.
The Mark Thompson Show.
That guy's the best.
He is the greatest. Love our Spencer Christian. Speaking of great,
not that you're not the best, Mark. Of course.
How dare you? How dare you put me in a separate category?
The Mark Thompson Show.
How about it for Steve Moskowitz?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you talk about great. Come on, over 30 years in the Bay Area, across California, anywhere in America. Steve can find you money. Anybody who can find you money is of value. You know, that's somebody you need on your team. Right, Steve?
Absolutely. And, one of the things that's just killing me about this ERC program, there's so many CPAs, so many firms are telling people they don't qualify because they don't qualify under the easy test, the drop in gross revenue. They're not telling about the other test. The other test is a lot more work. When I get one that's a drop in gross revenue, it seems so easy. Boom, your numbers are below. That's it. There's nothing more to talk about. It's math. 1 + 1 = 2. But so many firms are choosing to mass produce these. They don't want to go and do the work. And sometimes we have to have multiple meetings with the client, give them homework. But Mark, there can be hundreds of thousands of dollars or more at stake here, or less, but it's a lot of money. And it's free money because it's not even a loan. It's a grant by the federal government. It's a bailout for small businesses like they bailed out the big businesses. And the bottom line is that it's like a doctor saying there's no hope for your medical condition when there's a treatment, but that doctor just doesn't do it. He or she shouldn't say there's no hope. It's, well, I don't do that treatment, but find another doctor that does. So what I'd say is with ERC, that's where the government is giving away up to $26,000 for every employee that you have in 2020 and 21. And there's two tests to get it. There's the easy test, the gross revenue. There's the other test. It's a facts and circumstances test. So if you've never heard about it, give us a call. Or if somebody like your CPA said you don't qualify, then call us and let's see if you do qualify under this other test. Obviously, not everybody does, but a lot of people do. And I think I was mentioning to you the other day, I was talking still another CPA that I know, and off the record, I said, why are you doing that? He says, it's too much work for him. I said, well, okay, but at least tell people that it exists. Don't tell them there's no hope for them. So that's the bottom line. That's what I'd like your viewers to know, that even if you've been turned down elsewhere, you might qualify. Let's find that out.
Well, I mean, and I think one of the great things that you've detailed along the many months that we've discussed it, both on KGO and over here, is that there are a lot of situations that just don't present themselves as though you're eligible for ERC money. And then you look at it and go, no. Yeah, the simple test you're not eligible for. But actually, if you run this other kind of test, which requires, as you say, the more specifics, it requires some work on the part of whoever is doing the taxes, you can find actual money that is gifted to you by the government. I think that's the eligibility thing is amazing. How broad a spectrum of eligible people exist under this ERC.
There's so many examples there, Mark. I know we don't have time on your show, but there's example after example after example. And we actually talk to a client. We don't have the time constraint like we do here on air. We go over all those things with them.
Now, I love that you're in the Bay Area. You've been helping people for so long and supporting the show for so long. So Steve Moskowitz's 888 tax deal, 888-TAX-DEAL. I'm looking at it there at the bottom of the screen. Moskowitz LLP is another way to reach him. MoskowitzLLP.com. Steve, thank you. Love having you on.
Thanks, guys. Love being here.
Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
That's great. Both had the same thought. Thank you. I needed you to play something a little longer because I have to take a glass of water, but I can do it now.
Oh.
That's why I said, Albert, play a sweeper, not a sting. That was a sting, not a sweeper. Hang on a second.
Let's take a little water, have a little break.
You know, they do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Well, it's about that time to hit the news, so maybe I'll just hit the news and we'll get to the news.
All right, Albert.
Sorry, just doing my job, Mark. Just doing my job.
It is late, actually. I see now. Yeah, somebody let's let Jesus take the wheel, and let's get on to some news. John Rothman, when we come back, and there's a lot of back and forth in the chat. I'm only seeing a little bit of it about the Carter administration and about Jimmy Carter as we reflect on Jimmy Carter with the news of him in hospice. Let's let John Rothman weigh in on this. Weigh in on the success or failure, the presidency of Jimmy Carter. Rothman, I am actually dying to hear his take on that. And then we'll get into Ukraine and some of these other things, Ukraine a year later, et cetera. But I want to hear him weigh in on Jimmy Carter. We'll get into that next. Smash the like button like a boss.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
And let's get some news from Kim, Mark Thompson Show. Now, Albert.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz at 888 Tax Deal. Let us begin with a picture, an old picture from the, what is that,
Wow.
50s or 60s?
That's
They're
a cool
making
pick.
snowballs in San Francisco. It could happen. Oh, maybe.
For those who are listening and not watching right now on YouTube, it's a cool, describe it. It's a black and white pic. You see the Golden Gate in the background.
You can see the snow on the Marin Headlands in the background, and you've got people making snowballs and gathering what very little snow is stuck to the ground near a
So that's on the
guardrail.
San Francisco side of the Golden Gate Bridge, if you want to think of it that way, right? Above Baker Beach, or okay.
Yeah. I mean, so it's not a lot of snow, but it's snow in the city.
It's real snow. Look at the hood of the car, and there, it's
yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool. So that might happen. Is that what you're telling us?
It might
I thought
happen,
Spencer said it.
especially
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
in the
Especially.
North Bay. But hey, I go to sleep and I'll say a little, throw some into the universe. How cool would it be if we get a light dusting in San Francisco? But we've had some warmer temperatures, and now the National Weather Service is saying, especially for residents in Sonoma County, because I'm here in Sonoma County, all about the North Bay. The cold front that arrived in the region yesterday, along with 55-mile-an-hour wind gusts, could result in some snow in both the higher and lower elevations. Morning temperatures forecast to dip into the upper 20s and low 30s tomorrow and Friday. Highs likely only in the 40s. The wind gusts are expected to dissipate through the day. If there is snowfall in the North Bay, it's most likely to occur tomorrow and Friday, and it could go as low as 1,500 feet. So, kind of exciting. It's always
Sure.
exciting
I
when
mean, it's
something
exciting,
different
and
happens. Yeah.
as we said, in the southern part of the state, it's unprecedented. The blizzard warnings down there.
Yeah, and you're supposed to possibly see some snow on mountain peaks in the Southern California area as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely pretty intense potentially.
I've told you it's never easy being in this business.
Okay. Yes.
This is former Vice President Mike Pence. He is not ready to reveal if he'll be running for president in 2024 yet. Speaking with CNBC, all he would say is, I'll keep you posted.
Mike
And
Pence looks like the guy you would cast as president in a TV movie series. You know what I mean? Right?
His
Doesn't he
hair's
look
a
like
little too perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, he should be the president in 24. But I'll tell you, if you went in for the casting, they'd say no, it's too he's too on the nose. You don't want
Yeah.
he's too looking like that. Yeah, they'd find a president that looks a little more presidency. Presidenty. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Facebook parent company Meta planning to cut thousands of jobs despite the CEO predicting no more layoffs. The Washington Post reports that the company is getting ready to put some leaders into lower level roles without any direct reports. Some inside the company expect those people to eventually quit, which will then trim Meta's workforce by default. Speaking of business news, Amazon now owns One Medical, the primary care provider bought by the e-commerce giant for nearly $4 billion. We've been kind of waiting to see if that would happen. Story this morning about Nipsey Hussle. I don't know if you remember this rapper. He was shot in 2019. Well, the man convicted of killing Nipsey Hussle is going to be sentenced today in a Los Angeles courtroom. That is Eric Holder Jr. He faces life behind bars. He was also found guilty of attempted manslaughter for injuring 2 other people during that shooting. There is a $10,000 reward now being offered in an Oakland hit and run. Get this, you guys. Police shared pictures yesterday of a car that slammed into a 100-year-old man on Sunday morning. 100-year-old man left that man to die in the street. A witness video shows he was thrown about 35 feet, his cane still in the crosswalk. Police need help to find the suspected driver. They were in a tan or white Mini Cooper, and they're asking anyone with information to give them a call on this one. Yeah, Jesus, right. Subway plans to add electric vehicle charging stations to select restaurants across the country. The company announcing this project called Subway Oasis. It will create a dedicated space for drivers to charge their vehicles while they enjoy their favorite Subway sandwich. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. This report sponsored by Steve Moskowitz, and Steve has put his tax knowledge to work for individuals, for businesses. Don't matter who you are, what you got, he can help you. 888-TAX-DEAL, MoskowitzLLP.com. Steve Moskowitz is the perfect person to help you out of a jam. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is the Mark Thompson Show. Keep it to yourself.
Oh, yeah. I love it. Wow. It's quite impressive. Thank you very much, Albert. Thank you, everyone who is joining us in this second half hour of the first hour. This is our radio show from KGO. Come to YouTube. We brought everybody we could over here, and that's what we've been attempting to do. So you're sort of seeing, if you're new, a radio show in progress. We're sort of a hybrid radio show to visual medium, obviously, and then the show is out on podcasts as well across all the different podcast platforms. But we are crowdfunded, so we appreciate you supporting us. More on that still to come. But you can see super stickers, super chats, and the Patreon and PayPal that we'll get to. But apropos of KGO, and apropos is a ding word, I want to welcome in a guy who is, I'm going to say this, I hope he won't take offense. I feel as though he's the elder statesman of KGO with a sagacious quality to, his various takes on politics, and sagacious is a ding word as well. How about John Rothman, everyone? Come on. Yes. You are
sagacious.
The sage.
Sagacious. Very interesting. Good.
Yeah, you are the sage, my friend. Listen, John, before I get into some of the stuff that's happening now, Ukraine, a year in, et cetera, there is because of the Jimmy Carter thing, there is a conversation going on. It's going on in our chat. It's been going on here on the air as to his presidency. There were great achievements in his presidency. He was a victim of circumstance during his presidency. There are also those who say, no, he was great on details, but he was too into details, and so he didn't lead the nation in a way that it need be led. What was the truth about the Carter presidency in your judgment?
Well, historically, and I take a look at all the latest polls from presidential historians, and I'm included in that number, he ranks about in the middle. He's not viewed as a great president. He's not viewed as a failure. He had great successes during his presidency, including, as you pointed out earlier with Spencer, the Camp David Accords. He's the one who forged the first agreement, and there's no doubt that he deserved great credit for that. The other thing that I think he will stand out for, he's a great environmental president. He was awarded by the Sierra Club at the turn of the century, the award along with Theodore Roosevelt and Richard Nixon as being the leading environmental presidents. So that was quite something. And of course, most people don't realize it, but the Panama Canal Treaty was a great debate in this country. And it was during the Carter administration and due to Jimmy Carter that in the end, by one vote, the vote of Dennis DeConcini, who was a Democrat from Arizona, Senator DeConcini, that the Panama Canal Treaty was approved. So there were pluses and minuses. You ask about Carter's presidency overall. He was a micromanager. You couldn't use the White House tennis court unless Carter signed off on it. So he had the pluses and the minuses. He was not a successful president in terms of the overall evaluation of history. And as you pointed out, Mark, and rightly so, the Iran hostage crisis was a disaster. And Carter's handling of it, from the decision to admit the Shah to the United States for treatment to the bungled rescue effort, which I don't blame him for. Any president would have done it, just happened that it didn't work. Carter took a lot of heat on a lot of things. By the way, one of the most interesting aspects is Tip O'Neill, who was Speaker of the House, got along splendidly with Ronald Reagan, but not with Jimmy Carter. And of course,
that is interesting. That is really interesting. He seemed to be, I was mentioning, sort of pure of heart and spirit. I don't know what that gets you in Washington because, it's not necessarily something that's rewarded. But when you say that, I think, gee, I wonder how these negotiations go down. He seems like such an earnest man,
He was earnest. There's no question about it. But it also is true that many in the Democratic Party opposed him. I would remind you that Teddy Kennedy ran against him in 1980 in the Democratic primary and carried states like New York and California overwhelmingly. So although he lost the nomination, for Carter, it was a near fatal blow. And so that is an important part of the history as well.
And before I completely move on, and I do want to get to a lot of what's happening now with John Rothman, what about the economy, which suffered under double-digit inflation during his presidency?
Remember, that started really with Richard Nixon and wage price controls. And then Gerald Ford took the presidency, and remember, inflation was sky high during. Remember, I love it.
Whip inflation now.
The headline of the New York Post was that Ford said, "Drop dead to New York." There were all sorts of issues, but Carter's handling of the economy was very tough. You all remember the interest rates in those days, as high as 15%. So it was not a great success for him. But I have to tell you, you can't really hold a president necessarily responsible for the ups and downs of the economy. Those are things that happen, that over which very often presidents have no control.
Now I want to ask you about what is going on today.
Yes.
Biden is president. Biden took apparently it's presumably, this case, but now as I read about it, it was even more delicately planned a trip to Ukraine on this 1-year anniversary week. He took a super well laid out strategic trip he had wanted to take prior. I didn't realize that either until I'd done some reading about the trip that he's made. So anyway, he's in Kyiv, and he's there to address essentially the situation with a war 1 year in, and to renew, if you will, America's faith in supporting Ukraine and that they will prevail over this Russian incursion. Give me your thoughts on this situation 1 year in.
Joe Biden did a magnificent thing. He went to Ukraine. It's a city under siege. Presidents have traveled to war zones in the past, but this was a particularly important statement. Today, he's meeting with those nations which border Ukraine because he wants to reinforce the fact that Russia cannot cross that line. I thought that Biden did an outstanding job. And what was most interesting to me, because I listened, I suffer from low blood pressure. So I listened to Fox, and the attacks on the president for going to Ukraine and theoretically, in their minds, anyway, ignoring the problems here in the United States, from the train disaster in Ohio to the southern border, it's pathetic. And so I listened to Republican leadership, and the most important single thing to tell you is that Mitch McConnell has been solid in terms of his support for the Ukrainians. And I think there is a division in the Republican Party. It's not unusual. The Republican Party has always had divisions between isolationism and interventionism. And clearly the case needs to be made, and is being made, to the American people that what we are doing is really the first line. Essentially, if I can paraphrase, what Zelensky has said to us is what Winston Churchill said before World War II. Give us the tools and we will finish the job. And the question is whether they'll have the tools, will they have them quick enough? And may I just add one other quick point, and that is with all the attacks on NATO, and remember that it was Donald Trump who wanted to gut NATO and withdraw from NATO at one point, that the NATO alliance has never been stronger. And the most telling line was the president yesterday saying they wanted to weaken NATO, and now we have Sweden and Finland in NATO. So I think the legacy, whether Joe Biden is reelected as president or not, his steadfast support for Ukraine, his steadfast support for NATO will be a key part of the Biden legacy.
Let me ask you then what you see the next year playing out like, because even as we can talk about the bravery and talk about our steadfastness in standing with Ukraine, we are flirting with a nuclear capable Russia that has just pulled out of, and this is the other thing I wanted your comment on, an important nuclear accord, an agreement about nuclear weaponry,
which was signed by Richard Nixon and Leonid Brezhnev. I want you to know that what Putin is doing is very disturbing. It's not just disturbing to people in the United States. It's disturbing in Europe because there is a real fear. One of the things people don't understand is why did the president go to Poland? Because the Poles see themselves as a potential target of Russian expansionism. And we've made a firm commitment. And you will note that the president spoke again about the fact that an attack on one is an attack on all. This is a critical turning point in American history. And the withdrawal from the nuclear agreement is purely symbolic. He didn't really withdraw. He put it on hold. I mean, all kinds of nuances to it. But the simple truth is we live in a highly charged nuclear world, which frankly is very dangerous. So this is something, again, that has to be worked on and looked at carefully. I will mention the fact that Iran and North Korea are now working actively to help Russia. And Iran is on the verge of a nuclear capability. They're now at 86% enrichment, if not higher. I just heard the number 86%. And of course, North Korea has a nuclear capability. And the drones that are being used now by the Russians are coming from Iran. I mean, is this, if I can use George W. Bush's line, an axis of evil? The answer is whether it's an axis of evil or not, it is a danger to the whole world. And we need to be aware of that. Let me just point out that while Biden spoke, Russia fired its gargantuan missile for a test. And although Putin didn't talk about it, everybody was talking about it because it sent the wrong message at the wrong time, unless what Putin is trying to do is to really intimidate the United States. And Joe Biden, and he may be doing that. But I think it's to his error. People should not underestimate Joe Biden's resolve in this matter. Whatever you think of Biden, whether you like him, you dislike him, whether you think he's strong or weak, on this matter, he is being strong, effective, and a real leader, and has the genuine support of European leaders. I listened to former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson do an interview the other day. He's been here in the United States, and he applauded what Joe Biden is doing. And so this is something that we better understand and understand carefully. And for those conservative Republicans, it's not the mainstream of the Republican Party. It's the far right of the Republican Party. They're trying to attack the president. And Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and the usual chorus line of right-wing commentators. I think they make a huge, huge mistake. Their own credibility is put in jeopardy.
What is showing up in the chat now? Comments along the lines of this one. At some point, we need to determine how involved we're going to remain with Ukraine. Somebody else said, what in Ukraine is of interest to U.S. Taxpayers? I wonder if you can just speak to the importance of our involvement in Ukraine and support of Ukraine within this geopolitical system that you've just talked about, or at least touched on.
Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. Without Ukraine, the European food situation would be a disaster. The largest nuclear plant in Europe is in Ukraine. They are a vital source of energy. They are the front line, if you will, for all of the Eastern European countries: Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic. That's why everybody is right there. And if you take a look at a map of Europe, it's very small. It's not big. Those of us who've driven Europe, and many of you have gone on trains or driven a car across Europe, or if you haven't, you need to understand it's a very small amount of space. So we have a vital interest. And I can assure you that as long as Joe Biden is president, and I believe even if Joe Biden left the presidency, we would be committed to Ukraine. We can't afford not to.
Now to this country.
I'm not a warmonger. I'm not in favor of a full-scale war. What we're basically doing now is a defensive operation, not an offensive operation. We are not involved in the front lines of this thing. And it's what we did for Britain in 1940 before we entered the war, in early 1941, where we gave them the ability to survive. Without us, Ukraine would fall. And if Ukraine fell, let me tell you, there would be a domino effect. And I don't necessarily subscribe to the domino theory in Southeast Asia, which was a myth. But this domino theory is real. And all you have to do is see what's happening. By the way, do you know in Poland, it's very interesting. I found out this yesterday. They're building, like they have in Hungary already, a memorial tribute to Ronald Reagan. Because whatever, again, we think of Ronald Reagan, he was viewed in Eastern Europe as a liberator.
Sure.
And he is honored for that reason.
And, that reminds me of the Reagan line, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. And so these presidential addresses on a world stage are important. The rhetoric of those addresses is important. And even the symbolism of those addresses can oftentimes be important. So you make a very good point there.
You're absolutely right. 100%.
I want to ask you about this story that is getting some oxygen. And it's about it's again, these far-right flamethrowers like Marjorie Taylor Greene in this case, who plays the culture wars, but also really plays the very Trumpian. You never had heard it from a president before, this sort of us versus them, right versus left, red versus blue. You really never had heard at the presidential level anything but, we're all Americans and I'm a president for all Americans. That's been the familiar refrain from president to president, regardless of how policies actually shook out. I mean, Trump seemed to be driven by revenge on Democrats, and we know that, and we know how it played out here in California as well, with taxing, with various tax intricacies that were targeted toward Californians and hitting us hard. Anyway, Marjorie Taylor Greene has now suggested that there should be a national divorce, that the red states and blue states be separated. She is saying, and she's actually put some, meat on the bones, that if a Democrat moves to a red state, they actually not be allowed to vote for the first 5 years of residency.
Well, let me just say,
there's no need for the Department of Education, she says. Red states and blue states would be in control of their education in each state.
Mark, if you believe in the party of Lincoln, just go back and read Abraham Lincoln's first and second inaugural addresses. As the eve of the Civil War, he said, "We are not enemies. We must be friends." And what was Lincoln's great refrain? That he had to bind up the nation's wounds. He wanted to restore the solidarity of the Union. There is no higher goal for Democrats and Republicans, for all Americans, than the understanding of the unity of America. And I must tell you, a lot of people laugh at it, but that's why Joe Biden, in his closing lines and most of his speeches, says, "And God bless the united," and he underlines and emphasizes the word united states of America. What Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing, and what, frankly, a number of the others, Gosart and the others, what they're doing is undermining the very fabric of what the United States of America is. Look, Mark, we're not a perfect country. We aren't. We've made a lot of mistakes. There are a lot of issues which we have with policies then and now, but that's not the issue. The reason America has been success is because of its ideas, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States. These documents propelled us to become more than just a nation. We are not a great nation because of our wealth or our power. It's because of our ideas. And that has a refrain from not only liberal Democrats like Adlai Stevenson, but by Ronald Reagan, a conservative Republican. That was what unified us. And we should not lose that unity. And frankly, for those in Georgia who think Marjorie Taylor Greene is a great patriot, quite the contrary. She is somebody who clearly does not have the best interests of unity in the United States at heart.
Well, she's saying, John, just to the point, because it's, and the reason I mentioned some of the specifics is I think they track with certain corners of that party, particularly, which are associated with get the government off my back type thing. She says in a so-called national divorce, there would not be a civil war, but instead states would have more power to govern themselves. Like, oh, that's good. I mean, states are going to govern themselves. I get it. This system would feature Greene suggesting red states temporarily stripping Americans who move from blue states of the right to vote. I mentioned that. And possibly could even implement discrimination against LGBTQ people. And this is a quote, "Well, if we have a national divorce, there's no need for the Department of Education. Red states and blue states would be in control of the education of each state. They would not allow any type of gender lies being taught in their schools. LGBTQ woke teachers would be fired and not allowed to teach there," she continued.
Mark, it's a disgrace. And
Yeah,
the Republican Party needs to, frankly, do better. And the leaders of the Republican Party, whoever they are, need to speak out against that kind of rhetoric. It is divisive, and frankly, I believe it to be un-American in every way. Remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the one who talked about Jewish space lasers starting forest fires here in California. This is she's a nut and a kook. And let me point out, we've had nuts and kooks in Congress over many, many centuries, and it's okay. That's part of the American dynamic. But it is up to people like the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy, who is now embracing Marjorie Taylor Greene as a firm ally, to know better. And I'm going to tell you, in 2024, in the presidential election and in the congressional races, the record of the Republican Party is going to be up for a vote. And if the last election is any indication, that's not necessarily a good thing for them.
John, so much going on. I love that you were here with us on Wednesdays to weigh in on it. I so appreciate you, and the audience, of course, loves you. So really, I'm just exploiting you when I reflect on it.
May I say I'm delighted to be exploited, and I love being with you and with Kim and Albert. Thank you, Albert, for arranging everything. So it's always a pleasure and an honor for me to be on the Mark Thompson program.
Oh, that's so great. How about it for that sexy beast, John Rothman, everybody? Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Love seeing you, man.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Coming up in the 11 o'clock hour, Joe Ferrulo. He has as you know, a distinguished history commenting on media, but he is now running this new publication, which is dedicated to the Catholic Church and covering the Catholic Church. The National Catholic Reporter is what the publication is called. And to be fair, they're pretty tough on the politics of America and where it is right now, and how it doesn't, in one editorial piece I was reading, reflect the precepts of Catholicism. Okay, the spirit of Christianity is not reflected in GOP positions. So that's one thing they've said. But I thought one of the other things that really jumped out at me, and I wanted him to weigh in on this, was these papal decrees that are coming out about the gay community and about homosexuality and whether or not it's a sin. I'll save more of the specifics till Joe joins, but it's kind of wild because, people look up to the Pope. This Pope is more progressive than a lot of popes in the past, but that said, he's still kind of old school. In the Catholic Church, you can only move him so much on issues like homosexuality. And, the irony of that is, can't be lost on anyone. So, also in the next hour, I've got a really juicy Law and Disorder with an amazing revelation that has just come to pass. So we'll do that in the Law and Disorder segment that we'll be talking about. We'll be getting into the Proud Boys trial, which is going on in Washington right now. So there's that as well. So that and this revelation that has nothing to do with that trial, I'll share that all with you in the next hour. Smash the like button like a boss. Smash it for John Rothman. Smash it for everybody who works so hard.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Thank you, Walter, for $4.99. Come on, Walter. Big shout out from Hawaii.
Aloha.
Aloha, baby. It's the payroll conga. Yeah, we got to meet payroll. And we do it because we're crowdfunded with your help. So thank you for that. Walter, love you. Thank you. John Anderson, $5. He says it's windy again here in Marin County.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John Anderson. John looks like a handsome devil with that,
Yeah, he does.
hair and the coiffed beard. Enid Fox. Come on, Enid Fox. Wow.
Oh,
$50.
I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry.
That's nice.
This is cry territory, baby. Thank you so much for hosting John Rothman every week. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for hosting John Rothman every week. Dwight and Enid are very long time fans. Enid, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to cry, but
I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry.
I'm close to crying. I'll tell you what I am going to do for Enid. So far, the biggest donation, heartfelt feelings. That's not redundant. I'm going to give you a thank you. That's what I'm going to give you. So very cool. Thank you all. I will mention Thank you. Chappelle, thank you. I will tell you that the way you can contribute on an ongoing basis is through Patreon and PayPal. And you can also even just one-time it at Patreon and PayPal. Yes, we get to keep on the show more of whatever you donate, and that's because YouTube takes their pretty big piece, but that they take that because it's the ease of donation, right? It's easy on YouTube. Here you got to click. You have to go to themarkthompsonshow.com. Again, you got to put the themarkthompsonshow.com. You don't put the in there, you end up on a ventriloquist site. So go to themarkthompsonshow.com and you'll see the options there. Contribute to our Patreon or help support us via PayPal. That way you can leave us something, and that's where the lion's share of whatever you leave us goes to the show. You can also get Mark merchandise. There are click-throughs there for getmarkmerch.com. You've seen the latest glorious hoodie, which is behind me.
It's really nice.
It's the latest thing, everyone. You must have one. And it's, might I say, reasonably priced. Yes. There's also
I would say it's good quality really and cheap. Like it's a steal.
There it is. The Mark merch site. There's all kinds of stuff. Knock around on that. In fact, I'll tell you what I did this morning. I followed up. I sent last night a message to the merch people to send some merch to Spencer Christian because he's so good to join us regularly, Yeah. So, but here is the hoodie and the Mark Thompson Show fanny pack sling cross body bag, everybody. It's the latest thing to put all of your contraband in. So go for it. It's even got a little hidden pocket. So even if they spot your first...
Where are my weed smokers at?
Yeah, you've got the inside pocket, which can you can rock that for a while. All right. It is Wednesday. We love having you in the mix. Smash the like button, and we get into hour 2. We lead off with Kim's News. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
And this report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz at 888 Tax Deal. We've talked a lot about this, but let's go back to it because there's some new developments as far as what people are saying regarding the train derailment in Ohio. EPA Administrator Michael Reagan says officials will take the health concerns of East Palestine residents very seriously. Speaking with CNN this morning, he reiterated tests conducted on the Ohio town's air and water shouldn't be causing any symptoms following this toxic train derailment earlier this month. This comes after the EPA ordered the rail company Norfolk Southern to pay for all cleanup costs associated with this derailment. One group says the United States could default on its debt as early as June if Congress fails to raise the debt ceiling. The U.S. hit its borrowing cap in January, and since then, the Treasury Department has implemented extraordinary measures, they say, so the government can pay its bills. The Biden administration has called for the limit to be raised without any conditions. Today, the start of Lent comes at a time when we're told that church attendance, especially in the Catholic faith, is apparently on the decline. The head of Baylor Institute for Studies of Religion, Byron Johnson, though, says most studies about faith are actually flawed. He says the people responding to surveys don't see their denomination listed, so they get lumped in with atheists or agnostics, which he says is incorrect. So we don't really know how many people are feeling religious or are involved. I don't know.
Rulo when he gets here, who's got his hand on the pulse of at least the Catholic followers a bit. So hopefully, if he, it's weird. Albert, he will be here, right? It's Ash Wednesday, but he said he'd be here. So
we hope. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he'll have a perspective on that. Sorry, Kim, go ahead.
No. Carry on. Let's talk about Google. I don't know if you've been following this, but I sure have. This is a big case. Tech lawyers are watching as the Supreme Court hears arguments in Gonzalez v. Google. Justices voiced a hesitation, though, to upend Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. That protects tech companies from liability for their users' posts. The case, brought by the family of an American killed in a 2015 terrorist attack in Paris. They claim Google subsidiary company YouTube violated the Anti-Terrorism Act by aiding and abetting ISIS as it promoted the group's videos through its recommendation algorithm. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this case and whether or not it opens the floodgates for people to file suit against social media companies. A sad situation in the South Bay. Been super windy overnight, and looks like a tree came down right on top of a home in Boulder Creek, injuring critically a 1-year-old boy. Firefighters arrived last night to find this little one pinned to the floor. They had to use the jaws of life to free him. They say a giant redwood tree fell over during high winds, pierced the roof of this house, landed right in the living room. 5 other people.
God.
Yeah, inside that house, and 2 dogs had to be taken out of the home. And again, this 1-year-old boy critically hurt. The National Weather Service says these wind gusts could continue until this afternoon. And boy, is it ever windy out there. Here's a kind of a good story. If you're, liking all these outside seating areas all over the place, I'm not sure if is that going on in Southern California as well.
The parklet thing.
Yeah, the parklets.
Absolutely, of course. Yeah.
So, and I was recently took a little trip to Monterey. They have these parklets at the Fisherman's Wharf in Monterey, and it looks like they get to keep them. The city council voting to extend temporary seating permits and heaters until the end of this year. The deadline was supposed to be last December. The California Coastal Commission said many of the restaurants didn't have the proper permits. They were concerned about obstructing public access to the coastline, but the city asked for clarification and they extended. They say that fits the Coastal Commission's requirement, so you get to keep your parklets on the Fisherman's Wharf in Monterey just a bit longer. This report, sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz for more than 30 years. Steve has put his tax knowledge to work for individuals and for businesses. So if you need help with your taxes, call Steve Moskowitz. You can see the number at the bottom of your screen. It's 888-TAX-DEAL, and it's also MoskowitzLLP.com. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Smash it with your iron rod. Who's Mark Thompson?
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
What he's got going here is a situation.
It's unbelievably offensive.
Put up your pants, my man. Pull up those pants.
Ralph Nader just sent me a book. Did he send you one too?
I offer this sincere apology to you today.
Everything is going extremely well.
Calling me a liar? Now what you call me?
You, sir, are a liar.
You are a cover-up artist, and you are a liar.
Liar, liar, your pants are on fire!
Google told me.
Can you let him finish, sir?
It was wrong, it was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
No.
I'm going to tell you what I think.
What are the porn stars doing here?
Do you have a secret talent?
Doesn't anybody but a weed?
100% effective, how about that?
Say what?
And this is their new host.
There is no defense for my conduct.
I misspoke. I stand corrected.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
Time's up, mother effers.
What up, everybody? I actually talked to Alex Stone yesterday. He's the voice of Time's Up, mother effers there at the end of that sweeper. And I said, and he watches the show. And I said, hey, we use you and this Time's Up. He had never heard the Time's Up, mother effers. But that's Alex Stone from ABC News. I was speaking to him yesterday.
I love him.
Kind of fun. Yeah, it was sort of fun to tell him that was happening. Hey, Albert, he says he's here, and he's in the waiting area, but we don't see him in the studio.
That's weird.
Did you send him a current? You sent
I wonder
him.
Whose waiting room is he in?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I don't mean to turn it to you, Albert. Maybe it's not your fault.
You are high as a kite.
I am not high now, but I do have some high-like qualities, so I may not be seeing.
Let me send him a different link.
All right, I'm going to send you a different link, Joe. We'll send you a.
That's funny.
I'll send him this, and then I'm going to tell you a story from just last night. It's a kind of quick, but maybe some of you will be able to relate to it.
You won't hit the whoever's producing this drop, right? Just want to make sure.
Not yet. But if you could send the link to get my guest on, Albert. I just am saying I should.
Why are you yelling?
Have the guests that we promote ready to go. Yeah, that's right. The ventriloquist has a new guest. That's the Mark Thompson, who's the ventriloquist. That's the show that Joe is going to be going on. One of the things we'll talk to Joe about is the Catholic Church and Catholic faith and all these things and the Pope. So we'll get to that. But let me tell you what happened last night real quick, because I did want to mention it to you.
The Mark Thompson Show.
We're trying to watch all of the Oscar-nominated movies, all right? And so, we're slowly making our way through. And we had not seen, and I know many of you have seen it because it's a huge hit, so please don't dump on me. Hadn't seen Top Gun yet, okay?
Oh, you finally saw it?
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like, really, dude? Everybody's seen Top. Well, not us, okay? We're busy. I'm trying to build a YouTube thing. I'm dealing with them constantly. I've got a lot of stuff on my mind. And a lot of stuff's going on. And my dad, I've got a lot of excuses.
Why are you yelling?
So we sat down to watch Top Gun last night. First, getting the various networks that are associated with it. It's on Paramount Plus, which I pay for, but to see Paramount Plus, I have to get Apple TV talking to Paramount Plus, and that's on a separate HDMI, blah, 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 blah. So that takes about 20 minutes. Meantime, Courtney's making popcorn, getting all this stuff. So whatever. We're trying to finally Top Gun starts. We're excited. Okay. The lights are down, the audio's up, and Top Gun comes on the screen. And it's this cool kind of 80s throwback thing at the beginning where they're paying a tip of the hat, sort of, and some homage to the original.
Right.
And so the same way the original started, where, you see these jet fighters landing on the carrier and all this stuff, and the credits come on, and they're in the 80s font kind of thing. I'm thinking, wow, this is really a true homage to that original, And then, as the credits come on, Val Kilmer's name is the first name we see. I go, Courtney, are you kidding? This is mad respect, as Kim says, for Val Kilmer, a guy who's, suffered these health setbacks, and he was such a big part of the first movie. And then we're watching, and I can tell you, 6 minutes and 43 seconds went by, because I marked the time, before I say to Courtney, this is the original film. This is not this is not Top Gun.
Oops.
It was a classic moment where where I did what I always do.
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
We go back on Paramount Plus to the main menu.
Yeah.
And right next to Top Gun is Top Gun Maverick.
There you go.
So more on that in the future, but I feel, it was.
I was just reading this story that said the annual Oscar nominee luncheon is a chance to determine who's ahead in the race for the Academy Awards. Apparently, they can tell at the luncheon by the amount of applause people get. It's a hint of who might actually win the Oscar.
Well, it's
a wild idea,
but it just might work. Yeah, the LA Times, and then I want to bring on Joe Ferrullo. In fact, can we bring on Joe now? Because he'll remember what I'm talking about here.
No, listen, as far as the luncheon goes, it's the people who get the surf and turf. They're the ones who are.
They're the winners.
They're the real people, I think.
Joe Ferrullo, as you know, has been a friend of the show for a long time. Now he's changed gigs. He was writing a column for The Hill on politics and media. Now he's running an outfit called the National Catholic Reporter.
Awesome.
Reporting on Catholicism and Catholic church-related issues and interesting stuff. But before I get to that, I wanted to remind everybody about an LA Times thing that went down in the last decade. It's what you're talking about, Kim. It's predicting the Oscars. And I wanted Joe to come in on this because I'm sure Joe remembers this. The LA Times interviewed, because Oscar prediction is, all about what you're talking about, right? It's like, how can we read the tea leaves to predict who's going to win and all this stuff? And then the Oscars are ridiculous, and comparing pieces of art and movies is absurd. It's a promotion for Hollywood, but we always say that. But then you get into the horse race thing. So the LA Times, you remember, Joe, they interviewed a bunch of people who were Academy members, but they interviewed a lot of them. And they put together, based on their interviews, their projections for who was going to win the Academy Awards in all categories. And they laid out how they did it, and they laid out the predictions, and I think they were 100% correct, to the point that the Oscars, the Academy Award, the Academy as it's called, said, what the hell are you doing? This is, this destroys our franchise. Part of what we do is the reveal as to who wins. You guys are ruining that reveal. And the LA Times, as I recall, Joe, they backed off. They only did it for the 1 year.
Yeah, they did. And then I think the Academy also sent an email to its members going, hey, please don't do this again. If somebody calls you, please don't. But the LA Times did back off because, look, if you live here in LA and you get the LA Times, the way I do, or you go online, there are a ton of ads for that, for your consideration.
I see.
A ton.
Yeah.
And it may even keep that newspaper alive. And I love the LA Times, but advertising and newspapering, tough stuff these days. So those things are very important to the paper. So I would imagine they would.
All they had to say is, "Hey, look, dude, if you keep this up, we're going to have to pull our advertising," or even just you intimating that in any way was enough to get.
Yeah, you don't have to say it out loud. It could be very, very Godfathery. It could be. What a shame it would be if suddenly there was no advertising in your newspaper.
All right, now let me get on to your main thing.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Joe Ferrullo is here, and he has written, as I was mentioning before, on media and politics for years now at The Hill. Also has a background in journalism, an award-winning journalist, and now running this National Catholic Reporter, the independent news source covering the Catholic Church. And there have been some interesting remarks on the part of the Pope, and I wanted to ask you about them, and you've covered them extensively in your publication. Pope Francis, who I suppose is a progressive pope from the standpoint of some of the public positions he's taken. I mean, again, progressive is all relative, right? I mean,
exactly. But fair.
You're running a institution, and it's a hard thing to move it oftentimes, but to refocus it. But he said in an exclusive interview with the Associated Press, this is Pope Francis now, being homosexual is not a crime. It's not a crime. Yes, but it's a sin, he said. Fine, but first let's distinguish between a sin and a crime. And then he goes on, I wonder if you can maybe flesh it out for us a little bit. This is important because homosexuality is criminalized in, 60 countries?
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
Yeah. So put this position that the Pope has taken in some kind of perspective. First, he's still a very powerful guy. So for him to say this, I mean, is immensely important.
Yeah, look, him just saying it makes headlines. It doesn't mean that the church has suddenly changed its stance on something. And a lot of more conservative Catholics, especially in this country, get really shaky in their boots when he says stuff like that. He's just trying to guide people in some of these things. And it basically takes a lot of people to go along with it. So, carefully what he said was not changing church theology regarding homosexuality. He said, hey, it's a sin, got it. But not all sins are crimes, which are an important thing for Americans and American Catholics to realize. And so what he's been trying to do throughout his papacy, and a lot lately, is just say, can we just be a little bit of a bigger tent organization and make more people who want to join feel welcome, at least, and listened to and heard? And that's part of that effort. But it's something he has to do very gently and very slowly. I mean, Americans mostly are on board with this sort of thing. We're only 6% of the world's Catholics, so he's got a lot of other people to consider. So he has to kind of go almost half step by half step, and that was a pretty full step example of, hey, you've got a lot of countries here that actively criminalize people who are homosexual, and that's wrong.
Well, what is this?
I'm throwing a story up here. This is something that Pope Francis said most recently, and this is a headline from today. He said the church shouldn't put a label on itself like political party. He says the church is not progressive or conservative. Instead, he said choices and traditions need to be evaluated on whether they follow Christ, which is interesting because when you think about, what the church is telling people to do, you think definitely conservative, but he's saying no, that those labels don't apply.
Yeah, and he's been very big on that. In other words, he's decried things in this country in terms of how some of the bishops have polarized Catholics by waging cultural war issues. And his thing is, and that doesn't mean he's a crazy liberal. What he's saying is that's not who we are. We're not about the issues of the day. This is not about, whether these library books belong in your school or not. It's much bigger than that, and you're making it too small. You're shrinking what it means to be a Catholic and a Christian by taking sides on these small issues. Let's think about the bigger things in terms of helping people get through their lives.
It's also important. I thought the gay thing was important because in 11 of those 60-ish countries that make being gay illegal, they'll kill you for being gay.
Exactly.
Africa, Middle East. So to whatever extent you can incrementally take that toxin out of these cultures, it's a good thing.
No, I agree. And again, just by saying it, he knows he's going to make headlines, and it will have some ripple effect. Especially, he said that shortly after, I think, or shortly before he went to Africa. He had been in South Sudan and Republic of Congo, and so he was. On the one hand, he's saying we understand Africa is a very, very important part of the growing church. It's one of the few places on earth where it's growing. And so this is like, okay, by the way, some of those countries do this thing and it's wrong.
So it's an awkward position, and then we'll move on. But I think the Catholic Church finds itself in this awkward position regarding their own complicity in gay sex abuse. I mean, sex abuse of all sorts, but it's just because we're talking about the gay community. Yeah, a lot of it is gay sex abuse. How do they square that? How is that? It's an ongoing thing, I understand. So I'm asking you, as someone who watches it really day to day, how is it being handled, and is that changing? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's finally being handled better. Not perfectly, but better. But it took a long time to get there, Mark. I mean, the National Catholic Reporter, just for folks who don't know, and most of you don't, is an independent newspaper founded in the 1960s by a bunch of radical Catholics in Kansas City who were caught up in the changes of the 60s and who thought, you know what, we need a paper run by regular folks, journalists who cover the church the way good political reporters cover Washington, D.C., as an institution that has a lot of influence and should be held to account on some things. So we were the first newspaper back in the 1980s that broke the priest abuse scandal. The big break came with the Boston Globe in 2000. It took probably until a couple of years ago for the church to really, really begin to own up to what happened and change in a big way policies. It was happening a little bit at a time in certain parts of the world. But until Francis came along, and even it took him a few years to really get into it, did they really begin to change? And a lot of damage was done along the way to their credibility and their moral credibility, which is what I think you're speaking to, Mark. It's very hard for them to present themselves as moral guideposts on other issues when a lot of Catholics in this country and around the world go, "Oh, really? Where were you all of those years?" And they've begun to address it, but I think they're not fully aware of how long it's going to take and how much effort it's going to take for them to repair the damage.
There was another interesting piece that you did there at National Catholic Reporter, and it was about politics, which you know well, and how the Republican agenda, as it's being articulated and rolled out. I know there are a lot of different voices that are part of that agenda. And I don't mean to be too party specific, but you know, it's a two-party system here. So, you know, you get the whole breadth of political positions on both sides. You were saying in this piece that essentially it doesn't reflect a kind of being a good Christian, if you want to think of it that way, that the values that are Catholic values are not reflected in GOP positions is essentially your point.
Right. This was sort of as the new House was coming in and Kevin McCarthy was finally made the speaker, which, as you know, took quite a while. Our editorial was like, okay, so a lot of you guys got in there by waving the Christian flag and the Catholic flag and using culture wars as a way to get in. Okay, so now that you're there, what are you doing about that? Right? You guys pushed and pushed and pushed, most of you, to get Roe v. Wade off the books, with the promise that, you know, don't worry about it. We'll take care of everybody along the way. Well, okay, what are you going to do about that? So far, we haven't heard from Republicans about increasing health care at all, about increasing parental leave, about doing any of the things that would make a woman who's pregnant and doesn't have resources not seek an illegal abortion in her state now, if that's the case. Or not try to go travel out of the state to do something that you in the GOP say you would rather they not do. So there was nothing in their agenda, and there still isn't, Mark, as far as I know, that follows up on that and saying, okay, we're going to be pro-life in all of these other ways, which means you have dignity as a human being, and therefore you should get paid right, You should have access to health care. You should have access to all the things you need in order to raise your child.
Yeah, I mean, that's just such a courageous position, because it's odd. It shouldn't be courageous, but I guess what I'm saying is normally it's just a headline position. Yeah, get rid of Roe v. Wade. Good. Now now it's Christian values, but the reality is the values really start way past that.
Way past that. And look, the church used to be, it still is in some ways, used to be really good on this, which was for a long time, and not to get you guys deep into Catholic theology, there was this thing they would talk about called the seamless garment of life. An archbishop in Chicago once thought of this, which is, don't look at our abortion stance by itself. It's part of our whole view of what it means to have human dignity from the beginning of life to the end and everywhere in between. Dignity at work, dignity at home, the dignity of the family, dignity in your last days. And so that compelled the church to support a lot of social justice issues, which for many, many years they did. It's only fairly recently that more conservative parts of the church in this country said that, oh no, abortion is the preeminent issue for us. That's the one that we're going to keep hammering and hammering and hammering. The other part, we're not going to talk about. And they still haven't.
The other thing that you talk about, and it's kind of, I think it's relevant because it's about money, is defaulting on the debt and the sort of game of chicken that the GOP is playing. And you say, well, what does that have to do with Catholicism? It's interesting. Again, this goes to Catholic values, as articulated anyway. And the fact that, with this defunding, with sending this country into default potentially, you end up hurting those who the Catholic Church professes anyway to care the most about, that you send them into a tailspin.
Right. So again, whenever the Republicans seem to talk about debt, and they only talk about it when there's a Democratic president, it's all about, well, we have to cut Medicare and Social Security. Now, Biden, as you know, in the State of the Union, got them to pledge, oh, no, we're never going to do that. So we'll see. But there are other ways where they can cut the safety net and still leave Social Security and Medicare alone. So we'll have to take a look. But that's where they go. It's like, okay, how can we further undo the safety net for the most vulnerable? And to say that and say, but I'm a good Christian, is a little rough. But that's where they go. And that's where they go all the time.
I'm talking to Joe Ferrullo in our last couple of minutes, CEO of the National Catholic Reporter. It's interesting, Joe. I wanted to ask you about a story that Kim had. Multiple Emmy alert. What is that? That he's won more than he has.
If you put him back big, you can see that behind him, he's got so many Emmys, he can't even fit them all in the picture.
Oh my God!
Look at them all.
There's this one here. There we go. That's better.
It's like an embarrassment of Emmys there.
Yeah,
he was a TV journalist with an esteemed television journalist.
Yeah.
Before he gave it up to hang with the men of the cloth, and it is men. We don't have any women. No women in the Catholic at the top. And that's still ways to go on that.
Look, that's another thing that Pope Francis is trying to change. He's appointed some women to major roles in some of the Vatican bureaucracy for the first time, which has gotten everybody all shaky too. So,
in our last minute with Joe Ferrullo, I wanted to ask him about something that Kim reported on, which was about the Catholic faith and how it's doing worldwide according to polls. Kim, remind us what the story is there.
The story was that the Catholic faith is supposedly on the decline, but the head of Baylor Institute for Studies of Religion, Byron Johnson, is saying most studies about faith are actually flawed. So it's kind of hard to tell. He says the people responding to surveys, if they don't see their particular denomination listed, then they are lumped in with atheists or agnostics, and that's wrong. So it's hard to know whether religion or faith is more people are kind of not submitting to that, or whether that's not the case.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, all the studies that I've seen, and they're done by very, very well-respected organizations like the Pew Trust, shows that people are leaving established religious denominations. So if you're not on those lists, then you're probably not one of the. I mean, think of it: the mainstream, mainline Protestant denominations or Catholic. People are moving away from it. For a while, they were moving to evangelicalism. And even that now seems to have flattened and is beginning to go down, so that you have more and more people who identify as none of the above. And it's unclear where they're going, if they've gone to something else entirely, or they've just taken organized institutional religion out of their lives. That's what seems to be happening.
Right. It feels that just based on anecdotal kind of empirical evidence, don't you think? More people go, well, I believe in a force, or I believe in this, or I believe in that. But the organized faith and the traditions of organized faith are beginning to, I think, ebb a bit. Now, I say this a lot, and I'll say it again. I just think that faith does help you through a lot, and the traditions of faith. So not just a belief in, a spirit or whatever it might be, or an energy, but the actual comfort of those traditions and those rituals. It's something that does speak to us as Homo sapiens. Somehow we want it, don't you think, Joe?
No, I totally agree. I mean, honestly, you look at the beginnings of mankind and they've always been there. And look, I think what's happening now is a lot of people who move away from institutions may still feel like I believe in Jesus, and I believe in what he is and what he was and what he continues to be. I just don't believe in an institutional way to approach those teachings and live my life. Leave that up to me. I'll be okay. I don't need you to tell me what to do. But having said that, I agree with you, Mark. I mean, today is Ash Wednesday, which is one of the oldest traditions in the church, and is a way that people remind themselves at least once a year, we're only here for a short time, so make the best of it. And that does mean a lot to people. Listen, if you've ever been to funeral services, that means a lot to people, to be able to find some way to mark the passing of somebody, and lots of other smaller rituals throughout our lives. They really do help. But these don't have to be in conflict, right? You can enjoy all those rituals, find meaning out of them, and still feel that there's a church that listens to you and that can change and evolve with the times. Yeah. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive.
That's a challenge for so many faiths that have been out a long time, to step up and find a parallel with the times. So they can feel, it can feel a little bit out of step.
This is a word from the Lord, and he's not happy.
Okay.
Can I bring up one other story? Is that okay?
Well, we're running into your time, Kim. So
I know, but I'll cut into my time. You have the floor, sir. No, the Southern Baptist. There's a story, a headline. They're kicking out this mega church in Southern California called Saddleback Church because there's a female pastor, and that's the only reason. Just because a woman is leading the way there, and I think I was hoping maybe you could touch on maybe whether people feel disillusioned at things like that. That we talked about homosexuality in the church, and maybe kind of archaic views like this, where women can't be leaders or women can't be in positions of power, and whether that may have anything to do with whether people just take their spirituality and go somewhere else, or whether they feel like they can be part of institutionalized religion.
Yeah, I think it has everything to do with it. I mean, especially for younger people. It has everything to do with what you're talking about. People now who are in their mid-30s and younger say, listen, I can make those choices for myself in terms of who I want to welcome into my life or not. You don't have to do that. And they grew up in a world where diversity was a positive, where their friends are diverse, where women are running corporations and nonprofit institutions. So why can't they be more involved in every single facet of life? And it's a big turnoff for them. Our paper, we have about 1 million users a month on our online, and 44% of them, no, almost 50%, are 44 years old or younger. Almost 30% are 34 years old and younger, which is remarkable for any news organization, let alone a Catholic one. And it's because we do a lot of stories about how do we improve the role of women? How are we more welcoming to LGBTQ Catholics? What more can we do for the homeless and the immigrant? And most religions aren't talking about that in this country anymore. People are doing it. There are people on the ground who don't have a microphone or a camera, who roll up their sleeves and do that work. But all you hear from leaders are these more culture war things. And it really, really, really turns people off, but especially younger people.
You can find the National Catholic Reporter at ncronline.org. And it's interesting to read about this cultural and societal and political institution, the Catholic Church, and to see it change or try to change or try to handle a lot of the controversies and also sort of the cultural schisms, that exist. It's really, and schisms is a ding word, I think. But I really love your work, Joe, and I think that one of the things that's so great about your publication is its frankness. Seems like a very honest take on so much. So. Yeah. Thank you for being with us. I hope you'll again be a visitor. Keep us.
I would love to, and thank you guys for talking about these things. A lot of people, it's hard for them to talk about issues of spirituality and faith and how it all intercedes with politics and government, but it's important. So thank you.
Yeah. Joe Ferrullo, everybody, come on. Together for Joe Ferrullo. Right on.
I've told you, it's never easy being in this business.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I don't know how things are going.
I couldn't see. I was blinded by all the Emmys.
Guy had a lot of Emmys.
Yeah, you did.
He's an award winner. Pretty good. Smash the like button for Joe Ferrullo.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Yeah, it was a pretty good conversation. Look, there's one thing we can all agree on, can't we? Churches need to be taxed. Come on, man. I mean, that free ride is BS. You need to tax these churches. I mean, the idea that they're small country churches, and if you tax them, they're going. Guys,
there's never been anything like this.
They're mostly very profitable organizations, and it is ridiculous that they become political in the extreme.
Yeah.
I mean, if you listen to these sermons and you listen to these holy men tell you about, their view of, what God wants. And I mean, it's great. And that may be, you may subscribe to that, but I'm saying, great, tax them. I don't say whatever you want.
When they raided Mar-a-Lago, God didn't like that.
Exactly. That's the
See, Obama would love to be the Antichrist.
Exactly. So all I'm saying is tax them. Not a big deal. All right, smash the like button. Pony up for God, Tom says. Pony up, God. Come on.
The plate. Yep.
All right, we'll do some news, and I've got some law and disorder. Smash the like button. Thanks for your support. Love you being here. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'll keep it quick because I cut my time up into two here. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz at 888-TAX-DEAL. It's a day at the airport. Let me tell you, more than 1,400 flights have been canceled so far today because of a massive winter storm threatening to bring record snowfall to parts of the country. In Minneapolis, St. Paul Airport feeling the brunt of the impact. At least 45% of flights there have been cut today. Tornado warnings issued in eastern Missouri today as well. Transportation Secretary expected to visit the site of that toxic train derailment in Ohio. Pete Buttigieg will meet with community members impacted by the Norfolk Southern train derailment, receive an update on the investigation into the cause of the wreck by the National Transportation Safety Board. This visit comes after he called for several freight reforms in the wake of that accident, that train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. President Biden.
That it's produced this conversation. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
As I have noted, and I think Michael Shore noted it, and it will note it again. It's no one wants the government until there's an accident like this. Now all of a sudden we want regulations. What happened? To be fair to the Democrats, the regulations were instituted under the Obama administration, and they were rolled back under the Trump administration. I'm talking about the regulations concerning braking, but the chemical and toxic categorization of various things that are going to be transported by rail, that is something that's been around even prior to the Obama administration. So this BS where the chemical industry and the railroad industry essentially buy out the regulators and buy out the legislators, this is a real problem. That's why I thought this story, and I continue to think this story, has so much wrapped in with it that is all about what's wrong with this country. And you can start even those high-profile people, the mayor, the governor in Ohio, they are bought and paid for, and they are in this odd position where now they're sort of calling on this railroad company to clean up the mess.
Fix
Anyway,
it. Yeah. President Biden says Russia making a big mistake by suspending a key nuclear arms treaty. The president made the brief comment to reporters as he entered a meeting in Warsaw, Poland with NATO allies. Russian President Vladimir Putin announcing he would suspend Russia's participation in the new START treaty, which limits the number of long-range nuclear warheads both countries are able to keep in their arsenals. And balloons, we knew it was a possibility. They made it official. Balloons now a no-go in the city of Laguna Beach, the city adopting an ordinance prohibiting the sale, distribution, and public use of balloons. Balloons can't be used at events or on any public property. Balloons can no longer be released into the air. If you throw them away, the garbage can has to have a lid. The ordinance goes into effect in 2024. If you violate it, you'll pay up to $100 the first time, $200 the second time, $500 for every violation thereafter within a year. And if you sell balloons, your business license could be revoked.
Wow! Then they really nail you.
Violations
Trafficking in balloons.
They mean
We're gonna
business. They
lock you up and throw away the key.
They
That's
don't
what-
want balloons to be in the ocean, on the beaches, on the land, because people set them free and then that garbage comes right back down.
You know what? I know that, Mark, why can't we just have it the way it used to be with the? Because now we realize certain things, and when we realize certain things, we make modifications to the way we do things. And Kim, in detailing this story, is articulated the right thing, which is that these are, real pollutants. Why do we, and they are set off like you never have to worry about them again. But
Like they're going up and they're never coming down, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a weird thing.
Oh,
Anyway,
look at the
so I'm-
balloon. Isn't that nice? No.
Yeah. So no more celebrations and no more balloons, and that's it.
Good day, sir.
Yeah.
The party is over. Here's something you don't want to take to the airport with you, but apparently TSA agents say they confiscated martial arts swords from a traveler at Baltimore's airport. The weapons are so-called Sai swords. They are described as traditional Okinawan blunt weapons. They're typically used to deflect another weapon or to strike an opponent. Traveler tried to bring them through the security checkpoint. No, you can't go on the plane with those guys. You can't. No.
Man, that is pretty rough.
That's not fake. That's real.
That is real dangerous looking.
So if nail clippers and tweezers aren't okay, these probably on the no list, right? The traveler voluntarily abandoned them with TSA agents rather than checking them through in another bag this weekend.
Yeah.
They look like my fireplace poker. Yeah, Tom, true. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. For more than 30 years, Steve has put his tax knowledge to work for individuals and for businesses. If you need help with your taxes, Steve Moskowitz is the one I would trust to call. He's at 888-TAX-DEAL. He's also at, you can see it right there, MoskowitzLLP.com. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now, he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is the Mark Thompson Show. Keep it to yourself.
That's our new stinger that Albert likes so much. It's cute. It's very, feels almost presidential. Feels like it would be in one of those.
Wing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very West Wing. Great call. Yes, that's exactly right. Albert just put that together today. We kind of love it. It's a new toy.
Yeah.
Feels also like, as I was saying in the first hour, like Kevin Costner's voice should be on there, Yeah. Let's stand with America. With that kind of. Albert, what would you like to do here? Would you, this is probably the hottest 12 minutes of the show. It's going to be red hot. I could do some Law and Disorder. I really want to get to it. There's some big stuff happening. Proud Boys are on trial in Washington, as you know. There was a brothel that has been busted, and we like to cover the brothel beats.
Not again.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a brothel store, we got to get to Law and Disorder. So we should probably get to it pretty soon.
Now, are you going to play it from your end, or am I going to play it from mine? How is it going to work? I don't mind.
I will hit it right now.
All right, very good.
In the criminal justice system, the people,
pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law, you're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
How about those Proud Boys on trial for seditious conspiracy in Washington? Witness and cooperator Jerry Bertino back on the witness stand, talking about the all-out revolution that was expected by the Proud Boys. The jury is seeing messages from defendant and former Proud Boys chairman Enrique Tarrio. These messages are from New Year's Day, 2021. Quote, let's bring this new year with one word in mind: revolt and New Year's revolution. Now, a message, it goes on to say, from defendant Ethan Nordine is being introduced, described as a, quote, legend by Bertino. Again, Bertino is a cooperating witness for the state, for the feds in this case. This is a message from Bertino, from Nordine, who's another defendant. He's another one of the Proud Boys, to Bertino, who's a cooperating witness with the Proud Boys, from January 3rd. I don't think the police could survive a war with society, is what was said. Then the parlor message from defendant Joe Biggs. Remember, they're trying all these guys for seditious conspiracy at once. From January 2nd, 2021, every lawmaker who breaks their own stupid effing laws should be dragged out of the office and hung. Witness Jeremy Bertino, again the cooperating witness, says that after the Supreme Court refused to intervene on the election, quote, my belief was we had to take the reins and pretty much be the leaders that we had been building ourselves up to be. Everyone felt desperate. Bertino is talking about how the Proud Boys' attitude toward police was changing in the weeks before January 6, 2021. Quote, at this point, things had changed, and we weren't on their side, the side of the police, anymore. And after Enrique Tarrio's arrest on the 4th, one Proud Boys member suggested deleting the chat messages. Quote, I thought it was a good idea. This is Bertino saying this in quote. He said it on the stand. When asked by the prosecutor why, Bertino said, well, this is kind of why, right here.
Mm-hmm. So you knew what you were doing was wrong while you were doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Jurors are now seeing messages from others and what would happen if 1 million patriots stormed the Capitol building. Would the cops shoot into the crowd? We are now seeing Proud Boys messages from the morning of January 6, 2021. Aaron of the Bloody East wrote, that was what he was called, quote, the state is the enemy of the people. I want to see thousands of normies burn that city to ash today. And again on the morning, Proud Boy John Stewart, he was also called Johnny Blackbeard, quote, it's going to happen. These normie cons have no adrenaline control. They are like a pack of wild dogs. Effing let them loose.
What's a normie con?
Those are the people who I think are also there who are not Proud Boys. You know what I mean? But they're part of the effort. That was my understanding.
Oh, okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but I think that that's what that is. There are tons of these text messages, and they are brutal, just like that. He says, I was excited. This is something he says again. This is the cooperating witness. Quote, I was excited. I thought I was watching history. I thought I was watching the guys go into the building. He was mad that he wasn't there to witness, quote, the revolution. So this is an ongoing trial. There'll be extensive coverage here, but I wanted you to get a sense for the kinds of text messages and communications that crew was full of. And it was, well, it was what it was. And I'm glad they got these guys, as far as I'm concerned, lock them up and throw away the key. I mean, those people who were hurt that day, not to mention what you're trying to do to this country. A brothel worker is arrested after shots are fired in a SWAT team standoff.
What?
At the Moonlight Bunny Ranch in Nevada. Yeah.
Seems like such a charming place.
Yeah, it's legal there, I'll remind you.
The Moonlight Bunny Ranch.
Yeah, you can go there and, do what you got to do. Right.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
You can smash it with your iron rod, and it's fully legal there. So,
who is having that conversation?
A female worker at Moonlight Bunny Ranch in Nevada was arrested after a dispute broke out with a co-worker at the brothel. Wow.
Uh-oh.
It's
That's not fake. That's real.
The brothel is near Carson City. I probably don't need to tell all of you where it is. It was two colleagues, apparently, who got into it, if you'll pardon the expression. Deputies determined the one. Thank you. Yeah, I'm here.
Let me just interrupt you for a moment and tell you on Yelp, the Moonlight Bunny Ranch only gets 3.5 stars. So.
What?
Oh, my God. That is, well, look, your mileage may vary,
It is open 24 hours, and that's a nice amenity.
I would hope. I mean, some of those, when you gotta have it, you gotta have it.
Girl, you just woo.
Yeah. Apparently, one of the employees had fired a gun several times before locking herself in one of the rooms. Officers descended on the scene. A SWAT team joined them, and multiple other law enforcement agencies also arrived on the scene. It was 12:30 in the morning, Kim. 12:30 in the morning. That's not even late for a brothel. Things are just beginning to rock at 12:30. The worker, 26-year-old Savannah Henderson, also known as Tiara Tay. Oh, strong. I think that's a strong pseudonym.
Yeah.
Tiara Tay surrendered to cops, was taken into custody. Nobody was injured during the incident. That's yeah.
By the way, the Yelp reviews, hilarious.
What does the Yelp review say about the Moonlight? Is there a major announcement, the Yelp review?
No, I wouldn't call it a major announcement.
Okay.
Jen V says the bartender was nice. The saleswoman was a riot. Aside from that, my party and I felt rushed while we were in there. None of us were there for a girl. There's questions.
Nobody's there for a girl. They're just there. What?
Big shout out.
Yeah, I love
this
drinks,
place.
especially cocktails.
Josine says visiting this place has got to be the most badass thing I've ever done. Thank you, Pantera, for a very memorable experience and a great time. I'm definitely glad I came.
I get it. I
don't think you should apologize for how you feel.
Funny.
Oh my God, that is. Well, I went to the Moonlight Bunny Ranch, but I just didn't feel loved.
No.
Really?
Sayonara, sucker.
I don't know. Here is the last story, and it's a big one out of Law and Disorder, and it comes from Mexico. The U.S. government and the Mexican government put together a major effort to roll back cocaine distribution and to roll back the drug trade and the drug cartels that infest Mexico and have spilled over into this country in such a big way. One of the people who is key to being the point person in Mexico for the U.S. is a guy named Genaro Garcia Luna. He, the Mexican public security secretary. Now, this guy, Genaro Garcia Luna, the Mexican public security secretary, has been arrested.
Why?
Here he is now being arrested. He was found guilty. He had been arrested. He was found guilty in federal court of taking bribes from the drug cartels, the very drug cartels he'd sworn to combat.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the point man, as I say. Turns out he himself was mobbed up. International cocaine distribution conspiracy, conspiracy to distribute and possess with intent to distribute cocaine, conspiracy to import cocaine and making false statements. All of these things bringing him down. He essentially was his country, Mexico's FBI director, and now he's going down. 54 years old, no emotion as the verdict was announced. He turned around briefly to look at his wife, daughter, and son and placed his hands over his heart. He's the highest-ranking current or former Mexican officer ever tried in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, he's connected to El Chapo. Remember El Chapo?
Who could forget?
What he's got going here is a situation.
He does have a situation going. Anyway, the verdict, after 15 days of testimony from nearly 30 witnesses, Garcia Luna had pleaded not guilty to all charges. He will be sentenced later this
My
year.
bad. I'm sorry.
He'll need more than that.
Is that a guy you think that they can't let live? You think he's going to meet his maker in prison?
That's a good
cartels?
question. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think he can get any sort of sentencing reduction that would make him, talk about anybody. And that's what they worry about, right? That's what they're concerned with.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But it's a good question. It really is. It's a good question. It's pretty wild, the testimony. They had, cartel bosses, ranking cartel bosses testifying against him. And they said that his agents, remember, these are all guys who are working for like the Mexican FBI to combat supposedly drug trafficking.
Right.
His agents acted as bodyguards and escorts for traffickers. In return, prosecutors said that he was paid in U.S. currency, sometimes in $100 bills, in thick bundles of $10,000.
Outrageous.
The cash would be stuffed in suitcases, briefcases, and duffel bags. So he was just taking bribes like crazy while working for the Americans and supposedly the Mexican government, but he was doing nothing of the kind, just looking the other way and actually helping the drug traffickers, letting them know where the Mexican and American interdiction teams were. Pretty crazy. Interdiction's a ding word. That's Law and Disorder for today.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
Now, Neiman agrees with Kim. He's a goner.
Yeah.
Has the cash ever been found? Very good question. I know these are good questions. The cash in suitcases and duffel bags is the preferred form of remuneration for Tom. Tom, who's the unofficial umpire of ding. He calls out when they're ding words that are on the show. I wanted to mention what's on Nikki's show. Do you have it up?
We're talking about Legos today, about Lego kind of going woke. So that is one of the things that will be on the Nikki Maduro show as I scroll back looking for...
I love woke and I love Lego. There's nothing not to like there.
Here it is. Also, we're talking about the freeing feeling when you get laid off from a job and you no longer have that obligation. The DOT...
You don't have the burden of all that money to pay for things. I can't wait to get out from under it.
The DOD telling the military stay away from a certain food and... insane stories of animals getting high. All right, Nikki.
All right. Wow, there's a lot going on the Nikki Maduro show. That's starting right now on the Nikki Maduro channel. I will mention this. I'd like to recognize, if I can.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Andreas is back. Come on, Andreas.
Yeah.
Oh, where is he?
Sorry, we're all clicking at the same time.
Sticker. Yeah, come on.
Big shout out.
Big shout out for Andreas. Love you, Andreas. Love your show. Wow, 10 and then $20.
Big shout out.
Come on, Andreas. Don't make me cry. I'm all cried out. Andreas, smash that rod. Come on.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Smash that like button for Andreas, who's a big supporter of the show. He is really a stalwart supporter of the show, along with a handful of others. all of whom we will recognize in many ways in the year to come. We have a live event coming up. We hope for the spring, and we can really shine the limelight on so many of you if you want it. If you don't, if you'd like to just support from the shadows, that's fine as well. But Andreas, use the brothel rod and smash it, he said.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Andreas with another 10. Come on. Use the brothel rod. Deborah B., thank you for $10. I'm not going to cry.
I'm not gonna cry.
I love seeing Deborah B. with a super sticker for 10. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Really special. Lisa Fallon, thank you for your messages of humane treatment for animals. Also play the morning drop more.
Morning.
Morning.
We want to get on. Albert, will you remind me to put you in touch with the veterinarian who is involved in a lot of the efforts that Lisa's commenting on, humane treatment for animals? And so,
Morning.
All right, Albert, can you do that? Albert, would that be
Albert, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we will do more, and I'm glad you appreciate we get to some of that stuff once in a while. It's been great. Albert, hit your newest toy and then give me some farewell music, if you will, and I will say our final farewells in a sense here.
Joe Box and Little Anthony.
Shout out to Joe Box.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is the Mark Thompson Show. Keep it to yourself.
This shot of Albert still got the new smell on it. And now we say to you, first of all, Karen Q, big shout out. Love you, Karen Q, another regular supporter. Thank you for every little bit that you throw in, every big bit that you throw in. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. Life will get better then. We're close, but it's a journey. Can't rush it. I get it. But Daddy Andreas, exactly. Pinky is so right. Get it, Andreas. Love our Andreas and love all of you who help support it. I mentioned Patreon and PayPal. Those are great ways to support it on an ongoing basis. We're crowdfunded, so I appreciate that. But tomorrow, David Katz on the Georgia grand juror who is chirpy, who is chatty, and what that may do to the evolving case against Donald Trump and that constellation of people around Trump. That we'll get into with David Katz tomorrow. Belinda, what's the planet stupid? It's a big show tomorrow.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
All the time. Bye-bye. Thank you for being with us. Tim, Albert, everyone, thank you. And until tomorrow, bye-bye.